In 1944, the United States Department of Agriculture mailed pressure canner instructions to 4 million American housewives. The pamphlet was free. The cans of green beans she put up that summer fed her family through March. Her smokehouse cured the ham that hung over the porch by Christmas. Her root cellar held 600 pounds of potatoes, apples, and cabbages. The county extension agent drove out twice a year to teach her neighbors how to do the same. That same grandmother, doing those same things today, would be looking at fines in 43 states, federal violations in 9 of them, and in 2 states criminal charges that carry actual prison time. These were not eccentric old habits. These were the survival skills that kept rural America alive through the Depression, 2 World Wars, and the Dust Bowl. They were taught in 4-H, in Future Homemakers of America, in church basements, and at kitchen tables, and then, between 1962 and the early 2000s, almost every one of them was systematically lobbied, regulated, or legislated out of legal existence. Before we start, hit subscribe, because I am going to show you 25 of these skills, and number 19 was officially encouraged by the federal government until the year you might have been born. Number 6 was the one the FDA knew worked, and shut down anyway. Let's count down the 25 forbidden homestead skills that built this country, and the laws that buried them. Number 25. Selling raw eggs from a cooler on the porch. Your grandmother gathered a dozen brown eggs every morning from a flock of 15 Rhode Island Reds named after her sisters. She wiped them with a dry cloth, never washed them, and stacked them in a battered cardboard carton on a card table at the end of the driveway. The sign read, "Eggs, 40 cents." A tin can next to it held the change. Half her customers were strangers driving by. Nobody got sick. Nobody asked for a license. Today, in 29 states, selling unwashed and ungraded eggs from your home to anyone who is not a personal friend is a misdemeanor. Michigan requires a cottage food producer license before the first carton leaves your porch. California can fine you up to $1,000 per dozen for unlicensed sales. The USDA insists eggs must be washed in a sanitized facility, which strips the natural protective bloom that kept them fresh on her counter for 3 weeks without refrigeration. The bloom is what made the eggs safe. Federal regulation requires you to remove the very thing that protected it. Number 24. The community hog butchering. First hard frost in November, and your grandfather's farm filled with neighbors. 3 uncles, 4 cousins, and the man from down the road who owned the scalding barrel. They processed 4 hogs in a single day. The women rendered lard in cast iron pots over outdoor fires. The men hung the hams in the smokehouse before sundown. Each family went home with 60 pounds of pork and a jar of cracklings. No money changed hands. They would do the same at the next farm in 2 weeks. Today, this exact event is illegal in all 50 states the moment any meat changes hands between families. The Wholesome Meat Act of 1967, pushed through Congress by industrial packing interest, made it a federal offense to sell or barter any meat not processed in a USDA-inspected facility. The penalty runs up to $10,000 per violation and a year in prison. Personal use slaughter is still legal in most states. The instant you hand a wrapped shoulder across the property line, you have committed a federal crime. Number 23. Raw milk delivered to the back porch. Until 1987, in much of rural Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Vermont, the milkman who left bottles in your grandmother's icebox brought raw whole milk straight from a Jersey cow on a farm 2 miles down the road, 12 cents a quart in 1958. 2 inches of cream rose to the top overnight. She skimmed it for butter and gave the buttermilk to the hogs. Today, selling raw milk across any state line is a federal felony. In 20 states, selling raw milk in any form in any quantity is completely illegal. The FDA has raided Amish farms with armed agents over single gallons. A 2007 study published in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology, conducted across 5 European countries, found that children raised on raw farm milk had 41% fewer allergies and 50% less asthma than children raised on store-bought, your grandmother's milkman delivered medicine. Now it takes a search warrant to drink it. Number 22. Rendering lard for the year. When the hog came down from the gambrel, your grandmother claimed the fat first. Pure leaf lard from around the kidneys went into the pie crust jar. The back fat got rendered slowly in a giant kettle on the wood stove until the cracklings floated golden, and the clear liquid filled 40 mason jars. 50 pounds of lard was a normal year's supply. It went into biscuits, fried chicken, cornbread, and the Saturday night soap pot. Then, in 1911, Procter & Gamble launched Crisco. They hired the first generation of advertising psychologists and spent the modern equivalent of $40 million convincing American women that lard was unhealthy and that hydrogenated cottonseed oil was modern, scientific, and clean. By 1950, lard consumption had collapsed by 60%. Today, selling home-rendered lard to a neighbor is illegal in 47 states without a commercial kitchen license. We replaced it with industrial trans fats that the FDA was forced to ban in 2018 for causing heart disease. Your grandmother was right the entire time. Number 21. The backyard smokehouse. Behind nearly every farmhouse from West Virginia to Missouri stood a small cedar-sided smokehouse no larger than an outhouse. Your grandfather hung shoulders, hams, and bacon sides from the rafters, built a slow hickory fire in the pit, and let cold smoke drift up through the meat for 3 to 6 weeks. A Virginia country ham cured this way sold for $8 in 1968. The same ham today costs $180 at a specialty butcher. The reason? The USDA now requires a HACCP plan, which stands for Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Points, plus a licensed facility, an annual state inspection, and quarterly microbiology testing for any smoked meat that crosses a property line. The compliance cost runs $40,000 before you sell your first ham. The neighborhood smokehouse that fed a family through winter, sent a ham to the preacher every Christmas, and lasted 18 months on the shelf without refrigeration, is functionally outlawed. The technique worked for 400 years. Nobody got sick. The state replaced it with paperwork. Number 20. Canning and selling the surplus. Every August, your grandmother's kitchen turned into a small factory. Bushels of green beans, tomatoes, peaches, sweet corn, and dilly beans came in from the garden. She processed them in a pressure canner for hours, lining the cellar shelves with 400 mason jars. Whatever the family did not need went on the roadside stand for 50 cents a quart. Her bread and butter pickles were famous in 3 counties. Today, 14 states, including New Jersey, Wisconsin, and Kansas, prohibit the sale of any home-canned low-acid food, which means green beans, corn, soups, and meat. Cottage food laws permit jams and baked goods, but the moment a pH meter is involved, the state requires a commercial kitchen costing $30,000 to $50,000 to build out. Your grandmother used a pressure canner, a kitchen timer, and common sense. The government now requires a building permit and a contractor for the same result. Number 19. Home distillation of fruit brandy. Here is where it gets interesting. This is the one I told you about in the cold open. The federal government did not just allow this, they actively taught it. Your great-grandfather in Appalachia, the Ozarks, or the orchard country of upstate New York kept a small copper pot still tucked behind the corn crib. After the apple harvest, the surplus went into oak barrels, fermented into hard cider, and was distilled into applejack. He might make 10 gallons a year. A jar traded for a haunch of venison. Peach brandy, corn whiskey, blackberry cordial, and elderberry tonic were household medicines, not party drinks. A teaspoon of applejack with hot water and honey was the standard treatment for a winter cold in 1925. Here is the part nobody tells you. Home distillation for personal use was perfectly legal in most states until 1862, when Abraham Lincoln imposed a federal excise tax to fund the Civil War. The tax was supposed to be temporary. It is still on the books 163 years later. Today, even a single drop of home-distilled spirits, even for your own personal consumption, is a federal felony, carrying up to 5 years in prison. Meanwhile, the same agency permits home brewing of beer and wine up to 100 gallons per adult per year. According to Treasury Department records reviewed in 2004, the only reason distillation remains illegal is tax revenue. It was never about safety, it was never about prohibition, it was about money the government did not want to give up. Number 18. Rainwater collection from the barn roof. In 1925, your great-grandmother in Colorado, Utah, Nevada, or western New Mexico ran a downspout off the barn roof straight into a 500-gallon redwood cistern. That water irrigated the kitchen garden, watered the chickens, and filled the washtub on Monday morning. She collected what fell from the sky on her own land. Then in 1909, Colorado passed what became known as the Colorado Doctrine, which declared that all precipitation belonged to the first downstream water rights holder. Collecting rain from your own roof became a form of theft. Until 2016, Colorado residents could be fined for installing a single 55-gallon rain barrel. Utah restricts collection above 2,500 gallons. Washington required permits until 2009. Nestle, meanwhile, has spent millions lobbying to preserve corporate water rights in 14 states. Your great-grandmother collected rain. You need a permit. And in some places, an attorney. Number 17. The pit privy and the outhouse. Before indoor plumbing reached rural America, which in many counties of Mississippi and West Virginia did not happen until 1962, every homestead had a pit privy dug downhill from the well, 6 feet deep, lined with planks, a half-moon cut into the door, and a Sears Roebuck catalog for paper. Every 6 months, your grandfather dug a new pit and slid the privy over. The old pit got a layer of wood, ash, and lime, and a year later it grew the best squash on the place. Today, septic codes in all 50 states prohibit pit privies for any permanent residents. Alaska is the only state that still allows them in remote bush communities. Most states now require a permitted, engineered septic system that costs between $8,000 and $25,000 to install. Even composting toilets are illegal for residential use in 14 states. Your grandmother's system was free, hygienic when properly managed, and worked for 300 years. The modern replacement requires a contractor and a permit fee. Number 16. Selling pies at the church bake sale. Your grandmother woke at 4 in the morning every Saturday before the Methodist fundraiser. She rolled out 6 apple pies with leaf lard crusts, tucked them into the back of the station wagon, and dropped them at the fellowship hall. 25 cents a slice, $2 a whole pie. The church paid the heating bill on what she baked. In 2011, the FDA's interpretation of the Food Safety Modernization Act tightened, and suddenly home bakers across the country needed a cottage food license. Wisconsin was so strict that a group of grandmothers sued the state in 2013. They won, but only after 2 years of litigation. In Nebraska, pumpkin pie remains restricted today because its pH is not acidic enough. In New Jersey, the home sale of any baked pie was completely illegal until 2021. Meanwhile, commercial bakeries sell shelf-stable pies loaded with high-fructose corn syrup and 18 preservatives. Your grandmother's pie, made with butter, lard, and apples from the tree out front, was the one labeled dangerous. Number 15. Raw butter wrapped in cheesecloth. Your grandmother churned butter every Wednesday. The cream from the top of the milk crock, left to ripen for 2 days at room temperature, went into the glass churn. 20 minutes of arm work produced a pound of pale yellow butter. She salted it, pressed it into a wooden mold carved with a thistle, and wrapped it in cheesecloth dipped in brine. It kept a month in the cellar without refrigeration. She sold what the family did not need to the grocer in town for 35 cents a pound in 1953. Today, raw butter sales are banned in all 50 states under federal interstate commerce rules. Even in California and Pennsylvania, which permit raw milk, the butter cannot leave the farm. Research published by the Weston A. Price Foundation confirmed that raw butter contains the Woolsen factor, an anti-stiffness compound that pasteurization destroys, and bioactive conjugated linoleic acid that reduces inflammation. The dairy industry fought the research for 2 decades. Your grandmother's butter was functional medicine. We eat margarine spread. Number 14. Foraging on public land for ramps, morels, and ginseng. Your grandparents in Appalachia or the Ozarks knew every hollow and hillside where the treasures grew. They filled burlap sacks every spring and fall, kept what the family used, and sold the rest to buyers who drove up from Knoxville or Asheville. A skilled ginseng hunter could clear $3,000 in a season in 1972. That paid the property taxes for the year. Today, foraging on national forest land requires a permit in 31 states. Ramp digging was banned outright in Great Smoky Mountains National Park in 2004. Commercial ginseng harvest now requires site certification, because wild ginseng is a controlled export under international treaty. California criminalized selling any wild harvested plant without a permit in 2016, with a $1,000 fine per offense. Corporate supplement companies sell cultivated versions of the same plants for $80 a bottle. Your grandfather walked into the woods. You apply through a federal portal. Number 13. The root cellar farm stand. A good root cellar was the difference between a family eating through winter or learning the meaning of hunger. Your grandfather dug a 10-foot pit into the hillside, lined it with stone, and built a thick double-plank door. Inside, at a constant 52 degrees and 85% humidity, apples kept until April. Cabbages lasted 7 months in dry sand. Potatoes stored in straw-lined bins fed the family through March. She sold the surplus at the gate. A peck of apples for 40 cents, a head of cabbage for a dime. Today, selling root cellar stored produce from a home setup is illegal in 18 states without a dedicated cold storage facility inspected by the State Department of Agriculture. Daily temperature logs must be maintained. Humidity records get filed quarterly. The simple hole in the ground that fed 8 generations of your family is now a compliance violation. Meanwhile, supermarket apples stored in nitrogen-flushed warehouses for 14 months are sold to you as fresh. Number 12. Bartering eggs for coffee at the country store. Watch this one carefully. Before the cash economy fully consumed rural America, barter was the daily currency. Your grandmother walked into Beasley's General Store with a dozen eggs and walked out with a pound of coffee. A chicken for a hammer, 2 hams for a child's winter coat. Half a hog for the doctor's bill. No money changed hands. No tax was paid. No record was kept beyond a chalk mark on the back of the door. In 1979, the IRS issued Revenue Ruling 79-24, which formally declared that all barter transactions must be reported at fair market value and taxed as ordinary income on both sides. In 1982, the Tax Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act required all organized barter exchanges to file Form 1099-B for every transaction. Today, if you trade a bushel of tomatoes for your neighbor's help fixing your fence, you legally owe income tax. He owes income tax. Both of you are required to report the fair market value to the IRS. The agency knows it cannot enforce the rule on small trades, but the law is on the books. Your grandmother's entire economy is, on paper, illegal. Number 11. Keeping bees without state registration. Every orchard in America once had 2 or 3 white-painted hives in the corner, producing 60 pounds of honey per colony per year. Your grandmother kept bees in old wooden Langstroth boxes handed down from her father. She harvested honey with a heated knife, bottled it in pint mason jars, and sold what the family did not need at the gate for $2 a jar. Today, 38 states require mandatory beekeeper registration. Texas, Florida, and California also require annual hive inspections by a state apiarist. California's certification process costs $350 per year, plus mandatory written hive inventories submitted twice annually. Failure to register in Florida carries fines up to $5,000. The regulations were introduced in 2005 in response to varroa mites and colony collapse disorder, but enforcement disproportionately targets backyard hobbyists, while industrial pollination operations that truck millions of hives across state lines receive sweeping exemptions. Your grandmother needed a veil and a smoker. You need a license and an annual inspection. Number 10. Home slaughter of poultry for sale. Saturday morning, 8 in the morning, your grandmother would select 6 laying hens past their prime, dispatch them quickly with the chopping block by the woodshed, scald them in a galvanized tub of boiling water, pluck them by hand, and dress them out at the kitchen table inside an hour. 2 went to the freezer, 2 to her sister in town. 2 sold to the neighbor for $3 apiece in 1976. The USDA still permits processing up to 1,000 birds per year under the Federal Poultry Products Inspection Act exemption, but 22 states have layered on additional restrictions that effectively ban it. New York requires a $525 annual permit and an inspected processing facility for any retail sale. California banned all on-farm poultry slaughter for sale in 2015, except by certified mobile processors charging $12 per bird. Tyson Foods and Purdue lobbied state legislatures heavily through the 1990s and early 2000s for these restrictions. They knew that small farm gate processors were the single biggest competitive threat to industrial poultry consolidation. Your grandmother's freshly dressed fryer was the enemy. Number 9. Drying meat in the attic. In the dry, cool air of a New England or Pennsylvania farmhouse attic, your grandmother's salt pork, beef jerky, and dried venison hung from rafter hooks for a year and a half without refrigeration. She salted the meat heavily, hung it where the cross breeze ran strongest, and checked it monthly. The cool, dry air cured it naturally. Variants of this practice appear in every rural culture from Norway to Argentina. Today, the USDA prohibits dry curing meat outside of an inspected facility if any of it will be sold or bartered. The rule applies even to gifted meat if the recipient lives outside your immediate household. Home jerky for personal use is technically legal in all 50 states, but Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, and New Jersey have layered on temperature and time of cure parameters that make traditional attic curing functionally impossible to comply with. Commercial jerky is loaded with sodium nitrite, MSG, and added sugar. Your grandmother's was meat, salt, and black pepper. Nothing else. Number 8. The springhouse refrigerator. Before electric refrigeration finally reached the hollows of the Ozarks and Appalachia in the early 1950s, your grandparents built a springhouse over the cold creek that ran through the back pasture. Inside that small stone building, at a constant 50 degrees year-round, crocks of milk, butter, eggs, and pickled vegetables kept for a full week. Spring water flowed continuously around the crocks at ankle depth, doing the work that an electric motor does today. It costs nothing to run, ever. Today, building any structure over a natural water source without a Department of Environmental Quality permit is illegal in 43 states. The Federal Clean Water Act, layered with state-level wetland protections, treats every springhouse as a potential contamination point. Even when you own the land outright, the spring beneath it is regulated. A permit costs between $1,200 and $4,000, plus engineered drawings stamped by a licensed civil engineer. Your grandmother's springhouse ran on gravity and cold water. The modern equivalent runs on bureaucracy and a lawyer. Number 7. Lye soap from wood ashes and bacon grease. Nothing illustrates true self-sufficiency more clearly than your grandmother making her own soap. She saved hardwood ashes from the fireplace all winter long, leached them slowly through a barrel with rainwater poured over the top to make caustic potash lye, then combined it with saved bacon grease, and rendered tallow over a low fire on the back porch. The result was a pale amber soap, cut into bars with a length of wire, cured a month on the shelf, and used for everything from laundry to dishes to the Saturday night bath in the galvanized tub by the kitchen stove. A year's supply cost nothing but time. Today, the FDA regulates homemade soap sold commercially under cosmetic labeling laws. Title 21 CFR Part 700 requires ingredient testing, allergen labeling, and manufacturing under documented good manufacturing practices. 13 states also require a separate business license for any sale, even at a farmer's market table. The Etsy crafter selling 4 bars for $10 must comply with the same rules as Procter & Gamble. Your grandmother's soap, which was functional, biodegradable, and free, now requires roughly $2,000 in upfront compliance to legally sell. Number 6. Subsistence hunting for the family table. Controversy ahead. This is the one I promised you in the cold open. The skill the FDA and USDA both knew worked, and shut down anyway. Subsistence hunting, not for sport, not for trophies, but for food, was how your grandfather kept meat on the table from Thanksgiving to Easter. A single deer in November provided 50 pounds of clean venison. A dozen squirrels on a Saturday morning made 3 family dinners. Wild rabbit, turkey, grouse, and quail were all fair game in season. He also trapped muskrat, mink, and beaver for the fur, selling pelts at the state auction in March for an extra $200 to pay the seed bill. Today, subsistence hunting exemptions exist only in Alaska and on a handful of tribal reservations. Every state requires a hunting license costing between $25 and $200 annually. Selling wild game meat to anyone, even a relative, is illegal under the Federal Lacey Act of 1900 in all 50 states, with no exceptions. The fur trade is regulated by CITES, The Wholesome Meat Act of 1967 finished what the Lacey Act started. Your grandfather fed his family from the woods and earned spare cash from the trap line. Today, every deer requires a tag. Every trap requires registration. And selling a single rabbit haunch to your neighbor is a federal crime. Number 5. Cisterns and ponds in the dry West. Here is the big one. Your great-grandmother in Wyoming, Montana, eastern Oregon, or northern New Mexico designed her entire household around captured water. A redwood cistern under the porch caught roof runoff. A galvanized barrel at every corner of the barn collected storm surge. An earthen pond down by the lower pasture caught the overflow. She watered the garden, the chickens, the pigs, and even did her laundry with rainwater, because the well water was alkaline and ruined fabric. That cistern held 2,000 gallons in a wet year. It got the family through August. Between 1872 and 1960, 47 western and plains states passed prior appropriation water laws that classified all rainfall as the property of downstream rights holders. In Colorado until 2016, collecting rainwater on your own land was actively prosecuted. In Utah, homeowners faced fines for systems larger than 2,500 gallons. Meanwhile, the Nestle bottling plant in northern Florida pays the state $230 per year for the right to extract 1 million gallons per day from the Floridan aquifer. A Colorado homeowner faced a $500 fine for a 55-gallon barrel. This was never about water. This was about who owns the sky. Your great-grandmother owned it. You rent it. Number 4. Lay midwifery and herbal home medicine. Your great-grandmother did not call a doctor when her water broke. She called her cousin Pearl, the local midwife, who had delivered 200 babies in farmhouse kitchens across the county and charged $5 and a chicken. Home births attended by lay midwives were the norm in rural America until 1948. The same women treated cuts with comfrey poultices, fevers with willow bark tea, sore throats with honey and onion, and indigestion with apple cider vinegar and warm water. They knew 80 medicinal plants by sight and use, passed down across 4 generations of mothers. Today, lay midwifery is illegal in 13 states. Kentucky, Alabama, and North Carolina prosecute it as practicing medicine without a license, a felony charge that can carry up to 5 years in prison. Independent herbal practitioners face nearly identical restrictions. The FDA's 1994 Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act prohibits anyone from claiming that any plant cures, treats, or prevents any specific disease without going through an FDA approval process that costs over $1 million per claim. Your great-grandmother's working knowledge base, refined across 10,000 years of human history, became illegal almost overnight when pharmaceutical industry lobbying peaked between 1962 and 1994. The willow bark drying in her shed contains the same active compound as aspirin. She just was not allowed to call it medicine. Number 3. The wood-burning cookstove. Your grandmother's kitchen was anchored by a massive cast-iron home comfort cookstove with a warming oven, a hot water reservoir, and 6 adjustable lids for different temperatures. It burned oak and hickory that your grandfather split himself from the wood lot behind the barn. That single stove cooked 3 meals a day, heated the entire downstairs, dried herbs on the rack overhead, and boiled the wash water on Mondays. Annual fuel cost was the price of a saw file. The stove warmed 5 generations of one family, and your great-grandfather had traded 2 weeks of blacksmith work to get it. Today, in 19 states, any new wood stove must meet the 2020 EPA Step 2 certification standard. Stoves that fall short are banned outright in 38 municipalities, including Denver, Seattle, Portland, and the entire San Francisco Bay Area. The new certified stoves cost $3,500, contain catalytic converters, and require professional annual servicing. A traditional pre-1990 stove that does the exact same job with the same efficiency can result in fines of $1,000 per day of use during winter air quality alerts. The technology that warmed rural America for 150 years is now a finable offense. Number 2. The community barn raising. When your great-uncle's barn burned in the spring of 1948, 40 men and women from 3 churches showed up at sunrise on a Saturday with hand tools, a wagon load of cut lumber, and 3 pots of coffee. By sundown, the frame was up. By the following Saturday, the roof was on. Nobody charged $1, nobody signed a contract. The next time someone in the community needed help, they would all show up again. The whole rural economy ran on this principle for 250 years. Today, organizing a barn raising is functionally illegal in all 50 states once any volunteer sets foot on the property. OSHA workplace safety regulations apply the moment unpaid labor performs construction work. Workers' compensation insurance requirements kick in even with volunteers. State liability laws expose the property owner to lawsuits if any volunteer is injured. The insurance industry, through aggressive lobbying campaigns from 1971 through the early 1990s, transformed helping neighbors into an uninsurable activity. A modern equivalent project requires a licensed general contractor, 6 different permits, and a $4,000 liability policy. Your great-uncle's barn went up in 14 days. Today, the permitting alone takes longer than that. Number 1. The full autumn harvest gathering. This is the one. This is the moment every single skill on this list came together in a single golden weekend in October. Your great-grandfather's farm in Iowa, Ohio, Tennessee, or eastern Kansas hosted 10 families for the annual harvest gathering. The men slaughtered 4 hogs in the morning. The women rendered lard in 3 cast-iron pots over outdoor fires, while a separate group canned 200 quarts of tomatoes, applesauce, and green beans on the back porch. The smokehouse was loaded with hams by noon. The springhouse held the milk and butter cool. Children gathered apples for the cider press and corn for the cracklings. By sundown, each family went home with 60 pounds of pork, a smoked ham, jars of lard, quarts of canned vegetables, a sack of root vegetables from the cellar, and a jug of fresh-pressed cider. Some of it was traded, some of it was gifted, none of it was inspected, none of it was reported. Nobody got sick, everybody ate through winter. This single event, in this exact form, is now illegal in all 50 states the moment any food crosses any property line. The Wholesome Meat Act of 1967 covers the pork. The FDA Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011 covers the canning. The IRS Revenue Ruling of 1979 covers the bartering. The Lacey Act covers any wild game added to the table. The Clean Water Act covers the springhouse. State cottage food laws cover the baked goods. State licensing laws cover the cider press. The combined federal and state penalties for a full recreation of this single autumn day exceed $80,000 in fines and could land the host in federal prison. Your great-grandmother knew it, your grandmother did it, your great-aunt depended on it, and it is now the single most illegal homestead activity in America. We traded the autumn harvest gathering for plastic-wrapped pork chops from a confined animal feeding operation, a freezer full of TV dinners, and a $30,000 credit card balance. We called it progress. Here is my challenge to you. Pick one of these skills: the eggs on the porch, the rain barrel, the root cellar, the lye soap, the smokehouse. Try it quietly the way your grandparents did, without asking permission from a state agency that did not exist when your family learned it. Then decide for yourself, was your grandmother naive, or was she free in ways we are not anymore? Drop a comment below with the skill you are going to try this season, and tell me which one of these your family still practices in secret. I read every reply, and the comment section on a video like this becomes the most honest record of rural America anywhere on the internet. Every one of these 25 skills was perfectly legal within living memory. Every one of them built this country, and every one of them could be legal again. If this video opened your eyes, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone whose grandmother knew how to do these things. Because the moment we forget how is the moment they win.